5.6 is on pest control. Pests, of course, being anything that's going to do some sort of damage to our crops or livestock. Pesticide is a substance that is used to destroy the organism that is harmful to the crop or livestock. There are different types of pesticides, and the name given to that type of pesticide is based on the target. So, for example, herbicide, herb is plant. Herbicides destroy unwanted vegetation because that vegetation can compete with the crops for sunlight and nutrients and water, and we want to be able to have everything perfect for our crop. Fungicide destroys fungus or fungi. For example, stem rust on wheat can be very destructive and destroy lots of food. Rodenticide targets rodents, maybe like moles or it's like right now gophers, other things. Very sad. Insecticides are insects. Okay, moving on to a big issue with pesticides, what we call the pesticide treadmill. So basically it comes down to it's a form of artificial selection on accident. So what starts this all off is that we use just the same pesticide on all these crops. And it's great because, we have a huge reduction in the pests. Awesome. But then, because there's so little, they reproduce so quickly, and with such high populations, it's really very likely to have mutations that allow them to be resistant to that pesticide. And it's just, it's just the way it is, being our selected species. That's one of the advantages of being or having this kind of life or lifestyle. So because there's such a great chance of someone being resistant to that pesticide, that means they're the little buggers, buggers, get it, that get to reproduce and pass on that gene. But now you go from having just a few pests with that mutation that allows them to be resistant to this pesticide to now a whole bunch. And now you're back at square one. You've gotten, like all these pests that are destroying your crops. So the options from there was like, well, I now need a new pesticide. But now you're just going to be right back where you started because same thing. Someone's going to have a mutation that's going to allow them to be resistant. And then it just continues and continues and continues. So it's called a treadmill because it, like we go through this cycle over and over, kind of like a treadmill. If we graph this, each one of these dots is an application of the pesticide, and we'll find over time that population rarely goes back down to what it initially was when we first applied a pesticide. And that's because these guys that are surviving, now they've got generations of mutations that have allowed them to survive these pesticide applications. The benefits of pest controls, we see a decrease of crop damage by pests. Great. We have more crop yields, more money to the farmer, we have more food to the people. All in all, awesome. We need pesticides. We need some sort of way to kill the things that are doing damage to these crops. Cons of pest control, big one's bioaccumulation. So bioaccumulation, we'll talk more about this when we get to, I think, aquatic pollution or something. What it comes down to is pesticides are, not always, but typically things that don't break down in the environment. They don't decompose, they don't biodegrade or anything like that. And so they get absorbed into the littlest things in the environment. Down there it's not a big deal, it's not a high concentration, but the important thing is that it doesn't break down. And so their food source, or the prey that eats them, so they're the food source for something. And so now they eat a whole bunch of these little guys that has a small concentration, and then they end up with more of it. And more is seen, or more high concentration is seen as we go up the food chain until it gets into the highest guy in the food chain. And now they've got a huge concentration of this bad thing. And that's where we start to see the health effects. This is, by the way, bioaccumulation is the buildup of this substance in one organism. What I was just describing, the increase in concentration as you go up the food chain, that's biomagnification. They're very easily confused, but it is a very distinct difference. So this is important because in these higher predators, because they have such high concentration, they're the ones seeing the health effects. For example, with osprey and eagles, when DDT was a huge thing, we're finding that their populations went way, way down. And what ended up happening was that the DDT was causing their eggshells to be much thinner. And then when they would sit on their eggs, they would accidentally kill their offspring. And so we saw a tremendous decrease. But then after DDT was banned, then we saw a reverse of that population decline. And for instance, eagles now are not endangered because of that action. That being said, DDT could still be in the environment because other countries may still need to use it because the benefits outweigh the cons. It does also take a long time to break down. And then it just will take a long time until something better comes along. Also, with pesticides, there's the damage or the risk of accidental ingestion. That's really important, guys, to rinse your produce. Even if it looks clean, you never know. And then, of course, overuse is very likely, and then we get more of these issues. So genetic engineering does pose a really great opportunity to be able to decrease pesticides. So we can engineer plants to be naturally resistant to the pests and diseases. On the other hand, though, this can lead to a loss of genetic diversity. I will say, even if they're kind of like engineered with their own resistance, these are not things that cause damage to humans. For example, with BT corn, BT comes from the name Bacillus thuringiensis, the bacteria that was found to have a natural resistance to corn borers, which is this pest that causes this damage to corn. And so we were able to engineer corn to have this resistance, and we can compare the two. This is one without that gene. This is the one with that gene, and it's not damaged at all. And this is important because, again, this is a lost food, lost resources, lost water, lost energy, lost time, lost money. We don't want food waste. Food waste bad. We want things. But again, that does lead to loss of genetic diversity. You have all these plants that are exactly the same. So if something comes along, some other, bad thing, maybe another disease, maybe just something, then they are all the same, so they all have that same vulnerability. So, gotta weigh the pros and cons. That's kind of the moral of this entire class. Some pros, some cons. You gotta figure out which one is best for the situation that you're in. As a summary, describe the benefits and drawbacks of different methods of pest control.